A millionaire picks up the wrong child from school, who shouts in front of everyone, "You're not my father." The man is completely shocked by the situation. The little boy was identical to his son. When he gets home and confronts his wife, he almost faints at what she says. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Bennett's corner office on the 42nd floor of the Bennett Industries building. His fingers drummed absently on the polished mahogany desk as he stared at the latest quarterly reports. The numbers were excellent, as always, but something felt off about this particular Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had everything a man could want: a thriving business empire he'd built from the ground up, a beautiful wife named Sarah who supported him through thick and thin, and most importantly, their precious 8-year-old son, Tommy. The thought of Tommy brought a smile to his usually serious face. The boy was the spitting image of him at that age. Same golden brown hair, same penetrating hazel eyes, even the same dimple in his left cheek when he smiled. A gentle knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. His secretary, Patricia, poked her head in. "Mr. Bennett, your 3 p.m. meeting with the board has been pushed to tomorrow morning. Would you like me to reschedule your other appointments?" Marcus glanced at his watch. 2:15 p.m. Tommy's school let out at 3:30. For once, his schedule had cleared at exactly the right moment. "No need, Patricia. I think I'll surprise Tommy at school today." The drive to Westbrook Elementary took only 20 minutes in his sleek black Mercedes. As he pulled into the school parking lot, Marcus felt a surge of anticipation. He rarely had the chance to pick Tommy up from school himself, and he knew his son would be thrilled to see him. The school grounds were quiet, with most students still in their classrooms. Marcus decided to wait in the courtyard, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere and the warm spring breeze. As he stood there, memories of his own school days flooded back. The friendships, the challenges, the simple joy of being young and carefree. A bell rang, and suddenly the courtyard began to fill with children's voices and laughter. Marcus straightened his designer suit and scanned the crowd for Tommy's familiar face. That's when he saw him, or at least he thought he did. A boy with golden brown hair was standing near the playground, his back turned to Marcus. "Tommy!" Marcus called out, striding confidently toward the child. "Hey, buddy, I thought I'd surprise you today." The boy turned around, and for a moment, Marcus felt like he was looking at a photograph of his son. The same hair color, the same eyes, even the same slight tilt of the head. But something was different. The boy's clothes were worn and slightly too big for his frame. Nothing like the carefully chosen outfits Tommy wore. "You're not my dad," the boy said firmly, taking a step back. His voice carried a hint of confusion and fear. Marcus blinked, momentarily stunned. The resemblance was uncanny, impossibly so. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I thought you were my son. You look exactly like him." Before he could say more, a stern-looking man in a suit approached them. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone professional but cautious. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm fine," the boy said quickly. "This man thought I was someone else." The man, apparently the school principal, turned to Marcus with a questioning look. "I'm Marcus Bennett," Marcus explained, still unable to take his eyes off the boy. "My son Tommy is a student here. This young man, he looks identical to my son." "I'm afraid there must be some mistake," Mr. Mitchell said. "This is Michael Parker. He's not actually enrolled at our school. He's here with our after-school community program for underprivileged children from the East Side." Michael Parker. The name echoed in Marcus's mind as he watched the boy hurry away. Something deep within him knew this wasn't a simple case of mistaken identity. The resemblance was too perfect, too exact. And that feeling in his gut, the same feeling that had guided him through countless business decisions, told him there was more to this story. As he walked back to his car in a daze, Marcus pulled out his phone to call Tommy's teacher, confirming his son was still in class. He needed to know where his boy was, needed to assure himself that everything was as it should be. But even as Mrs. Johnson assured him that Tommy was fine and working on his art project, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Michael Parker from his mind. That night, as he sat in his home office long after Tommy had gone to bed, Marcus couldn't focus on his work. His thoughts kept returning to the boy in the courtyard. He opened his laptop and typed Michael Parker into the search bar, knowing it was probably useless, but unable to stop himself. The need to understand, to make sense of what he'd seen, was overwhelming. Sarah Bennett noticed the change in her husband immediately. Over their 15 years of marriage, she had learned to read the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the almost imperceptible signs that something was troubling him. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Marcus barely touched his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual while studying his face. Tommy was engrossed in his spaghetti, happily twirling the pasta around his fork, oblivious to the tension in the air. Marcus looked up, meeting her eyes for a brief moment before looking away. "I went to pick up Tommy from school today," he said slowly. "Something strange happened." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Oh?" she managed, forcing herself to maintain her composure. "What do you mean?" "I saw a boy there," Marcus continued, his voice low enough that Tommy couldn't hear. "He looked exactly like our son. Identical. His name is Michael Parker." The glass slipped from Sarah's hand, water spilling across the pristine tablecloth. Tommy looked up, startled by the noise. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Sarah said quickly, her voice unnaturally high. "Just a little clumsy tonight. Why don't you go finish your homework? Dad and I need to talk about some boring grown-up stuff." Once Tommy had left the room, Sarah began dabbing at the spilled water with trembling hands. Marcus watched her, noting how pale she had become, how her movements seemed mechanical and forced. "Sarah," he said quietly, "what aren't you telling me?" She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. "The boy looks exactly like Tommy, not just similar, identical. And your reaction just now—" Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense but controlled. "I've never seen you drop anything in all our years together. You're always so careful, so precise." Sarah's hands stilled on the wet tablecloth. "Marcus, please," she pleaded. "Some things are better left in the past." "What past?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. "What are you talking about? What do you know about this boy?" Sarah finally looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes took his breath away. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't talk about this. Please don't ask me to." Marcus stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'm going to find out what's going on," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Either you can tell me now or I'll discover it myself, but I won't rest until I know the truth." He walked to his office, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the silent house. Sarah remained at the dining table, her tears falling silently onto the damp tablecloth. In the distance, she could hear Tommy humming as he did his homework, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his perfect world. Marcus sat at his desk, his mind racing. He opened his laptop again, this time with purpose. As CEO of a major corporation, he had resources at his disposal, private investigators, research teams, connections throughout the city. With a few quick emails, he set the wheels in motion. Whatever secret Sarah was keeping, whatever connection existed between Tommy and this mysterious boy who looked just like him, Marcus would uncover it. As he worked late into the night, he could hear Sarah moving around the house, putting Tommy to bed, her footsteps careful to avoid passing his office door. The distance between them felt vast, filled with unspoken words and hidden truths. For the first time in their marriage, Marcus felt like a stranger in his own home, looking in from the outside at a life he thought he knew everything about. Sarah lay awake in their bed, alone, staring at the ceiling as tears rolled silently down her temples. The secret she had carried for 8 years, the choice she had made in what she believed was the best interest of her family, was about to unravel. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus's desk as he reviewed the preliminary findings from his private investigator. After a sleepless night, his eyes were tired, but his mind remained sharp, focused on unraveling the mystery that had upended his world. The initial report contained basic information about Michael Parker and his adoptive family. The boy lived in the East Side district with James and Eleanor Parker, a modest couple in their early 60s who had adopted him as an infant. James worked as a high school janitor, while Eleanor volunteered at the local community center. They lived in a small house on Cedar Street, worlds away from the luxurious lifestyle Tommy enjoyed. Marcus's fingers hovered over his keyboard as he debated his next move. The investigator had discovered that Michael's adoption records were sealed, but there were irregularities in the paperwork. The timing of the adoption coincided exactly with Tommy's birth date, August 15th, 8 years ago. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out, quickly minimizing the window on his computer screen. Tommy poked his head in, already dressed in his school uniform. "Dad? Mom's acting weird. She didn't make breakfast, and she's just sitting in the garden staring at nothing." Marcus felt his heart constrict. He'd never seen Sarah like this before. She was always the epitome of composure and efficiency. "Don't worry, buddy," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll make you breakfast. How about some pancakes?" In the kitchen, as Marcus mixed the pancake batter, he watched Tommy through the window. The boy had joined Sarah in the garden, sitting beside her on the stone bench. She had wrapped her arm around him, holding him close as if afraid he might disappear. The sight made Marcus's chest ache with a mixture of love and growing uncertainty. After dropping Tommy at school, Marcus drove to the east side of the city. He knew it was impulsive, possibly even reckless, but he couldn't help himself. He needed to see the Parker's house with his own eyes, needed to understand the environment where Michael was growing up. Cedar Street was a quiet residential area, lined with modest but well-maintained homes. The Parker's house was small but neat, with a tiny garden where marigolds bloomed in carefully tended beds. As Marcus sat in his car across the street, he saw an elderly woman, Eleanor Parker, step out onto the porch with a watering can. She moved slowly but purposefully, tending to her flowers with obvious care. There was something gentle about her, something that spoke of a lifetime of nurturing. Marcus thought about approaching her, introducing himself, but what would he say? How could he explain his presence without sounding like a madman? As he watched, a school bus stopped at the corner, and Michael stepped off. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Seeing the boy again only confirmed what he already knew. The way Michael walked, the slight tilt of his head as he adjusted his backpack, even the way he waved goodbye to his friends on the bus, it was all exactly like Tommy. Michael spotted Eleanor and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist in a warm hug. The woman's face lit up with joy as she embraced him, and Marcus felt an unexpected pang of emotion. Whatever was going on, whatever secrets lay buried in the past, it was clear that Michael was loved. Back at his office, Marcus received another email from his investigator. They had managed to trace some medical records from 8 years ago. Sarah had been admitted to St. Mary's Hospital with complications during her pregnancy. The records mentioned twins, but after that, things became unclear. There were missing documents, inconsistencies in the paperwork. Marcus leaned back in, his chair, his mind racing. Twins. The word echoed in his head, bringing with it a flood of memories from Sarah's pregnancy. She had been so ill, confined to bed rest for months. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the way she would sometimes cry in her sleep. At the time, he had attributed it to the normal stress of pregnancy, but now, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos until he found what he was looking for. Pictures from the day Tommy was born. Sarah looked exhausted but happy in the hospital bed, cradling their newborn son. Marcus studied the images carefully, looking for any clue, any sign of what might have happened to another baby. A text message from Sarah interrupted his thoughts. "Please come home early tonight, we need to talk." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. The simple words carried the weight of 8 years of secrets. Whatever Sarah had to tell him would change everything, their marriage, their family, their entire lives. He thought about Tommy, about Michael, about the two elderly couples, one wealthy, one modest, raising identical boys who should have grown up together. As he packed up his things to head home, Marcus caught his reflection in the window. The successful businessman, the loving father, the devoted husband, all the roles he thought he understood so well were shifting beneath his feet. The truth was waiting for him at home, in the form of a conversation he never expected to have with the woman he thought he knew better than anyone in the world. The drive home felt endless. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as his mind raced with possibilities. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but he barely noticed the beauty around him. All he could think about was Sarah's message and what awaited him at home. When he finally pulled into their circular driveway, he saw that Tommy's bike wasn't in its usual spot. A note on the front door explained why. Tommy is at Jack's house for a playdate. Mrs. Wilson will drop him off at 8. Sarah had orchestrated this moment carefully, ensuring they would have privacy for whatever she needed to tell him. Marcus found her in their living room, sitting in the bay window where she often read on Sunday afternoons. She looked small and vulnerable, nothing like the confident woman who had stood by his side at countless business functions. "Sit down, Marcus," she said softly, gesturing to the armchair across from her. "I need to tell you everything." Marcus remained standing, his body tense with anticipation. "Why now, Sarah? Why not when I first asked you about Michael?" "Because I've been carrying this secret for so long, I almost convinced myself it wasn't real." She took a shaky breath. "Do you remember how difficult my pregnancy was? Of course, you were in and out of the hospital for months. What you don't know is why." Sarah's fingers twisted together in her lap. "I was carrying twins, Marcus. Identical twin boys." Even though he had suspected this truth from his investigation, hearing it from Sarah's lips made Marcus's knees weak. He sank into the armchair, his world tilting on its axis. "The doctors told me there were complications," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said both babies were at risk. They said," her voice broke, "they said we might lose them both if we didn't make a choice." Marcus leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What kind of choice, Sarah?" "Selective reduction," she said, the medical term falling from her lips like a stone. "They said it would give at least one baby a better chance of survival. I was terrified, Marcus. You were in London for that crucial merger, and I couldn't reach you. I had to decide right then." "You should have tried harder to reach me," Marcus said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This wasn't a decision you should have made alone." "I know that now," Sarah whispered. "But at the time I was scared and confused, and the doctors were pushing for an immediate decision. I couldn't bear the thought of losing both our babies." "So you chose Tommy?" Marcus said flatly. "No." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. I couldn't do it. I couldn't choose between them. I carried them both to term against the doctor's advice. They were both born healthy, Marcus. Both perfect." Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "Then why? Why is Michael living with another family? Why didn't you tell me we had 2 sons?" Sarah's face crumpled. "Because 2 days after they were born, one of them, Michael, developed complications. The doctors said he needed expensive, specialized care that our insurance wouldn't fully cover. You were still in London, the company was in a precarious position with the merger, and I made another choice." "You gave our son away," Marcus said, his voice ice cold. "The Parkers were at the hospital. They couldn't have children of their own, but they had excellent medical insurance through James's union. They agreed to adopt Michael and get him the care he needed." Sarah stood up, reaching for Marcus, but he stepped away from her touch. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving both our boys." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared out the window at their perfectly manicured lawn, their expensive cars, all the trappings of success that suddenly seemed meaningless. "All these years," he said finally, "every time Tommy achieved something, every birthday, every Christmas, there was another little boy out there, our son, and you never said a word." "I convinced myself it was better this way," Sarah said, her voice small. The Parkers gave him a good home, they loved him, and he recovered completely. I told myself he was better off not knowing, that it would only confuse and hurt both boys if they knew the truth. Marcus turned to face her, his expression unreadable. And now? Now that I've seen him? Now that I know we have another son growing up just miles away from us? What do we do with that truth, Sarah? The sound of a car door slamming outside broke the tense silence between Marcus and Sarah. Tommy's cheerful voice could be heard, thanking Mrs. Wilson for the ride home. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself, while Marcus took several deep breaths to steady his emotions. Their son burst through the front door, his backpack bouncing against his shoulder. "Mum! Dad! You won't believe what happened. It's at Jack's house. We built this awesome rocket with his new science kit and—" Tommy's excited chatter trailed off as he sensed the unusual atmosphere in the room. His bright eyes darted between his parents, picking up on their strained expressions. "Is everything okay?" Marcus forced a smile. "Everything's fine, buddy. Why don't you go up and get ready for bed? I'll come up in a few minutes to hear all." "How about your rocket?" Once Tommy was upstairs, Marcus turned to Sarah. "We need to handle this carefully. He's going to have questions. Both of them will." Sarah nodded, wringing her hands. "The Parkers don't know that we know. They've raised Michael as their own for 8 years. This will devastate them." "And whose fault is that?" Marcus snapped, then immediately regretted his harsh tone. "I'm sorry, but we can't think about the adults right now. We need to focus on what's best for the boys." The next morning, Marcus called his office and cleared his schedule for the day. He spent hours in his study, researching similar cases, consulting with family therapists, and trying to figure out the best way forward. Sarah moved through the house like a ghost, mechanically performing her daily tasks while lost in her own thoughts. Around noon, Marcus's private investigator called with more information about the Parkers. They were well respected in their community, known for their volunteer work and kindness to neighbors. Michael was thriving under their care. He was an excellent student, played Little League baseball and had many friends. The investigator had even managed to obtain a recent school photo. Marcus stared at the picture on his computer screen. Michael's smile was identical to Tommy's, right down to the slight crookedness of his front teeth that the dentist had said would need braces soon. How many other similarities would they discover? How many shared traits and talents had been developing separately, unknown to each other? A soft knock on his study door interrupted his thoughts. Tommy stood there, still in his school uniform, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son, come here." Marcus pushed back from his desk, making room for Tommy to perch on his knee like he used to when he was younger. "I heard you and Mom talking last night," Tommy said quietly. "Not everything, but you were talking about another boy? Someone who looks like me?" Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He and Sarah had planned to wait, to consult with professionals, before telling Tommy anything. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. "Yes," he said carefully. "What exactly did you hear? Something about twins?" Tommy's voice was uncertain, and Mom was crying. She said she made a choice. He looked up at his father, his hazel eyes full of questions. "Dad, do I have a brother?" The directness of the question, delivered with a child's innocent curiosity, made Marcus's throat tight with emotion. He had rehearsed this conversation 12 times in his head, but now, faced with his son's earnest expression, all his carefully prepared words seemed inadequate. "Yes, Tommy," he said finally, deciding that honesty was the only possible path forward. "You have a twin brother named Michael." Tommy's eyes widened. "Like in The Parent Trap?" he asked, referring to the movie he'd watched at a friend's house recently. "But why doesn't he live with us?" "It's complicated, buddy," Marcus said, pulling his son closer. "Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that they think are right at the time, but things don't always turn out the way they planned. Your brother has another family who loves him very much, just like we love you." "Can I meet him?" Tommy asked, his voice filled with excitement rather than the anger or confusion Marcus had feared. "Does he like baseball too? Does he have the same favorite color as me? Does he—" The questions tumbled out one after another, and Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest. His son's natural curiosity and openness might make this situation easier than he'd feared. But he also knew that the initial excitement could give way to more complex emotions later. "Slow down, buddy," Marcus said gently. "We need to take this one step at a time. Meeting Michael isn't just up to us. We need to talk to his family too. And Mum and I need to figure out the best way to handle everything." Tommy nodded solemnly, then wrapped his arms around his father's neck in a tight hug. "Dad," he whispered, "I always wanted a brother." Marcus held his son close, his eyes burning with unshed tears. Through the study window he could see Sarah in the garden, sitting on the same bench where she'd held Tommy just yesterday morning. But now he understood her fierce embrace, her fear of letting go. She had been holding on to both her sons in that moment, the one in her arms and the one in her heart. The Parker household buzzed with its usual evening activity. Eleanor stood at the stove, stirring a pot of her famous vegetable soup, while James sat at the kitchen table helping Michael with his math homework. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that had played out countless times over the past 8 years. "And if you multiply these numbers first," James was saying when the doorbell rang, interrupting their routine. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll get it," she said, but James was already rising from his chair. "You watch the soup, dear, I've got it." When James opened the front door, he found himself face to face with Marcus Bennett. Even without an introduction, James recognized him immediately. He'd seen the businessman's photo in the local papers often enough. His heart sank as he realized what this visit must mean. "Mr. Parker," Marcus said formally, "I believe we need to talk." Eleanor appeared behind her husband, drawn by the tension in the air. One look at Marcus's face told her everything she needed to know. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Michael," James called over his shoulder, his voice remarkably steady. "Why don't you take your homework up to your room? We need to speak with this gentleman." "But I'm not finished with the problems yet, Dad," Michael protested. "It's okay, son, we'll finish them later." Marcus's breath caught at the word son, such a simple word that now carried so much complexity. He watched as Michael gathered his books, noting how the boy's movements mirrored Tommy's so precisely. Once Michael was upstairs, James led Marcus into their modest living room. Family photos covered the walls, Michael's school pictures, birthday celebrations, family vacations. A lifetime of memories captured and displayed with pride. "We knew this day would come," Eleanor said quietly, sinking into her favorite armchair. "We just hoped we'd have more time." "You knew?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "You knew he had a twin brother? A family?" James took his wife's hand. "We knew everything. Sarah, Mrs. Bennett, told us the whole story when she asked us to adopt Michael, about the complications, about her fears, about her husband being away on business." "And you agreed to take him, just like that?" "No, not just like that," Eleanor said, firmly. "We agonized over the decision. We knew we could provide the medical care he needed, but we also knew we were participating in separating twins. It went against everything we believed in." "Then why did you do it?" "Because Sarah convinced us it was the only way to save both babies," James explained. "Our insurance could cover Michael's medical expenses, expenses that might have bankrupted your company at a crucial time. She said she was choosing life for both her sons, even if it meant they had to live apart." Marcus ran a hand over his face, overwhelmed by the new perspective on his wife's decision. "And after he recovered? When he was healthy? Why didn't anyone think to reunite them then?" "By that time, Michael was ours in every way that mattered," Eleanor said, tears rolling down her cheeks. "We loved him as our own." Sarah would check in occasionally, always anonymously, to make sure he was doing well. She made us promise never to tell him about his brother, said it would only confuse and hurt both boys. "And now?" Marcus asked. "Now that I know? Now that my son, that Tommy, knows he has a brother?" The three adults sat in heavy silence, the weight of 8 years of secrets pressing down on them. From upstairs came the faint sound of Michael humming as he worked on his homework, blissfully unaware that his world was about to change forever. "What do you want from us?" James finally asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I want..." Marcus paused, considering his words carefully. I want what's best for both boys. They deserve to know each other, to have a chance at being brothers. But I also know that you're Michael's parents in every way that matters. I'm not here to take him away from you." Eleanor's shoulders sagged with relief, but her eyes remained worried. "How do we tell him? How do we explain that we've kept this from him all these years?" "Together," Marcus said firmly. "We do it together. These boys are going to have questions that none of us can answer alone. They're going to need all of us, you, me, Sarah, to help them understand and cope with this truth." James nodded slowly. "Michael's always been curious about his birth family. We told him he was adopted from the beginning. We believed. He had a right to know that much at least. But this, finding out he has an identical twin brother, it's going to change everything." "Change isn't always bad," Marcus said, thinking of Tommy's excited questions earlier that day. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of something new, something better." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all fall silent. Michael appeared in the doorway, his math book clutched to his chest. "Dad, I really need help with these problems." He trailed off as he saw Marcus, his eyes widening with recognition. "You're the man from the school, the one who thought I was someone else." Marcus stood slowly, his heart pounding. This was the moment, the beginning of a new chapter in all their lives. "Hello, Michael," he said softly. "There's something very important we need to tell you." Michael sat on the couch between Eleanor and James, his math book forgotten on the coffee table. His eyes darted between the adults in the room, sensing the gravity of the moment. Marcus had taken a seat across from them, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Sweetheart," Eleanor began, her voice gentle, "you know how we've always told you that you were adopted, that we chose you to be our son because we loved you from the moment we saw you." Michael nodded slowly. "You said my birth mother wanted me to have the best life possible." "That's right," James said, squeezing Michael's shoulder. "And she did. She wanted that more than anything, but there's more to the story. More that we should have told you before." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his heart aching as he watched Michael's expressions shift, the same subtle changes he'd seen countless times on Tommy's face. "Michael," he said softly, "my name is Marcus Bennett, and I'm your biological father." The boy's eyes widened, his mouth forming a small O of surprise. My real father." "James is your real father," Marcus corrected quickly. "He's the one who raised you, who's been there for you every day. I'm your biological father, the one whose DNA you share." "Like in science class?" Michael asked. "When we learned about genetics?" "Exactly like that," Marcus smiled, impressed by the boy's quick understanding. "But there's something else you need to know, something even more important." Eleanor wrapped her arm around Michael protectively, and James nodded encouragingly. They had discussed this moment briefly while Michael was upstairs, agreeing that the truth needed to come out all at once, like removing a bandage quickly rather than prolonging the pain. "You have a brother, Michael," Marcus said gently. "A twin brother named Tommy. That's why I recognized you at the school that day. You look exactly like him because you're identical twins." Michael sat absolutely still, processing this information. His face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, wonder, and something that looked like recognition. "Is that why—" he started, then paused, gathering his thoughts. "Is that why I sometimes feel like there's something missing? Like there's supposed to be someone else there?" The adults exchanged surprised looks. They had read about the special bond between twins, how some reported feeling connected even when separated, but hearing it described so innocently by an 8-year-old was startling. "That might be exactly why," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "They say twins have a special connection even when they're apart." "Can I meet him?" Michael asked, his voice filled with the same eager curiosity that Tommy had shown. "Does he like baseball too? I'm really good at batting. Coach says I have a natural swing." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. "He does like baseball. He's on his school team too, and he wants to meet you very much." "But honey," Eleanor added, "we need to take this slowly. This is a big change for everyone. We need to make sure we do what's best for both you and Tommy." Michael's face fell slightly. "But you're still my mom and dad, right?" he asked, looking anxiously at the Parkers. "This doesn't change that?" Never, James said firmly. Nothing could ever change that. We're just adding to our family. Now you'll have more people who love you. Like in Joey's family? Michael asked, referring to his best friend. He has step-parents and step-siblings, and he says it just means he gets more presents at Christmas. The adults couldn't help but laugh at the simple wisdom in his words. Leave it to a child to find the bright side of a complicated situation. Something like that, Marcus agreed. Though this is a bit different. Tommy is your twin brother, and he's very excited to meet you. But everyone here, your mom and dad, my wife Sarah, and me, we all want what's best for both of you. Michael was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can I see a picture of him?" Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through to find a recent photo of Tommy. As he handed it to Michael, he watched the boy's face carefully. Michael stared at the image, reaching up unconsciously to touch his own face, as if confirming the similarity. "We could be the same person," he whispered in awe. Then his face lit up with excitement. "Wait until I tell Joey about this. I have a twin brother. It's just like in the movies." The adults shared relieved looks at Michael's positive reaction, but they all knew this was just the beginning. There would be questions, adjustments, and probably some difficult moments ahead. But for now they could take comfort in the pure, uncomplicated joy of a child discovering he had a brother. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, turning to Eleanor, "is this why you always buy 2 of everything? Like when you got me those new sneakers last month, but bought another pair in the same size and said they were for later?" Eleanor burst into tears, pulling Michael into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart, yes, I've been doing that since the day we brought you home. I always bought 2 of everything, hoping that someday you'd both have the same things, even if you were apart." Marcus watched this exchange with a new understanding of the complexity of their situation. These weren't simply people who had kept his son from him. They were parents who had loved both boys in their own way, even when they could only care for one. The playground at Riverside Park was carefully chosen as neutral ground for the twins' first meeting. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the park was filled with the sounds of children playing and parents chatting. Sarah had suggested the location, remembering how both boys had always loved the swings, another shared trait they would soon discover. Tommy sat on a bench between Marcus and Sarah, his legs swinging nervously. He wore his favorite blue t-shirt and kept smoothing it down, wanting to look perfect for his brother. Sarah had tried to comb his unruly hair, but it refused to stay neat, just like Michael's always did, as they would soon learn. "What if he doesn't like me?" Tommy whispered to his father, a hint of anxiety creeping into his voice for the first time since learning about Michael. "That's impossible," Marcus assured him, squeezing his shoulder. "You're going to get along great. Just be yourself." Sarah spotted the Parkers' car pulling into the parking lot. "They're here," she said softly, her hand finding Marcus's and gripping it tightly. The Parkers emerged from their modest sedan, Michael between them. He was wearing a blue t-shirt almost identical to Tommy's, another of Eleanor's twin purchases that now seemed prophetic. The boys caught sight of each other across the playground, and time seemed to stand still. For a moment no one moved. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, both boys took a step forward. The adults watched in amazement as Tommy and Michael walked toward each other, their movements perfectly mirrored until they stood face to face in the middle of the playground. "Hi," Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hi," Michael replied, equally quiet. They stood there, studying each other with intense curiosity. Other children ran and played around them, but the twins seemed to exist in their own bubble, oblivious to everything else. "You really do look exactly like me," Michael said, breaking into a grin. "No, you look exactly like me," Tommy countered, grinning back. Just like that, the tension broke. The boys burst into giggles, and Tommy pointed to the playground. "Want to go on the swings? I bet I can go higher." "No way!" Michael laughed, already running toward the swing set. "I'm the best swinger in my whole school." The adults watched as their sons raced to the swings, their laughter echoing across the playground. Sarah leaned against Marcus, tears streaming down her face. "Look at them," she whispered. "They're exactly the same." Eleanor stepped closer to Sarah, hesitantly at first, then with determination. "They were always meant to find each other," she said softly. Deep down, I think we all knew that. The two mothers watched their sons swing higher and higher, their movements synchronized, as if they'd been practicing together all their lives. James and Marcus stood slightly apart, both feeling somewhat awkward but united in their love for the boys. "Race you to the monkey bars," Tommy suddenly shouted, jumping off his swing at its highest point. "Tommy!" Sarah called out instinctively, her heart in her throat. But Michael had already done exactly the same thing, landing perfectly beside his brother. They took off running together, their steps in perfect rhythm. "They're going to be handful," James observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Two handfuls," Marcus corrected, finding himself smiling despite his lingering concerns about the situation. As the morning wore on, the adults began to relax, following the boys' lead in accepting this new reality. Tommy and Michael moved from one playground activity to another, discovering their shared interests and similarities, with each exclamation of "me too" and "I love that too." They found out they both hated Brussels sprouts, but loved pizza with extra cheese. They both had a habit of sleeping with one foot sticking out from under the covers. They both collected rocks that looked like faces and had trouble sitting still during math class. "It's like they're making up for 8 years of conversation in one morning," Eleanor observed, watching the twins compare favorite superhero stories. Sarah nodded, her guilt mixing with joy as she watched her sons together for the first time since they were newborns. "I wish," she started, then stopped herself. "We can't change the past," Eleanor said gently, "but we can make the future better for them." The boys ran back to their parents, breathless and excited. "Can Michael come to my house?" Tommy asked. "I want to show him my room and my baseball cards and my telescope." "Can I, Mom? Dad?" Michael looked hopefully at the Parkers. "Please?" The adults exchanged glances, realizing they needed to establish boundaries and schedules to figure out how to blend their families while maintaining stability for both boys. But looking at their sons' eager faces, they knew they would find a way to make it work. "How about we all have lunch together first?" Marcus suggested. "There's a nice pizza place just down the street." "With extra cheese?" the twins asked simultaneously, then burst into laughter at their synchronized request. As they walked to the restaurant, Tommy and Michael led the way, their chatter continuous and animated. Behind them, two sets of parents followed, watching their sons with a mixture of joy and wonder, all of them realizing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their shared story. In the weeks following the twins' first meeting, both families worked to establish a new normal. The Bennett's spacious home office had been transformed into a makeshift family planning center, with a large calendar on the wall marked with various colored dots indicating which days the boys would spend together and with which family. Sarah stood before the calendar, adding another blue dot to Wednesday afternoon. "Michael has baseball practice at 4, she said, consulting her phone. "Tommy's practice is at the same time but on a different field." "We could alternate who takes them," Marcus suggested, looking up from his laptop where he was researching the psychological effects of reunited twins. "That way they can watch each other play sometimes." The sound of laughter echoed from upstairs, where the twins were playing video games in Tommy's room. It was their third play date this week, and the boys had become inseparable, making up for lost time with an enthusiasm that both delighted and exhausted their parents. "Did you see the note from Michael's teacher?" Sarah asked, holding up a piece of paper. "She says he's been talking about Tommy non-stop in class. Apparently, he started signing his homework Michael Bennett Parker." Marcus smiled, but there was a hint of concern in his expression. "Eleanor mentioned something similar. Tommy told his friends he's changing his name to Tommy Parker Bennett." Sarah sank into a chair, her face troubled. "Are we moving too fast? Should we be setting more boundaries?" The child psychologist said this kind of behavior is normal, Marcus reminded her. "They're trying to establish their connection to make it tangible." She said the most important thing is to support their relationship while maintaining stability in their separate lives. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. It was Eleanor dropping off Michael's overnight bag for his first sleepover at the Bennetts. The boys had begged for weeks, and finally, both sets of parents had agreed. "He's so excited," Eleanor said, handing over the carefully packed bag. He laid out his clothes 3 days ago. James had to convince him he didn't need to pack his entire room. Sarah took the bag, noticing how new everything looked. The pajamas, the toothbrush, even the sleeping bag. Eleanor had obviously gone shopping specially for this occasion. The thought made her throat tight with emotion. "Eleanor," she said suddenly, "I never properly thanked you for everything you've done for Michael, for loving him so completely." "Don't," Eleanor said gently, holding up a hand. "We don't need to go there. What matters is now and what's best for our boys." The word "our" hung in the air between them, a bridge between past and present, between guilt and forgiveness. From upstairs came the sound of running feet and more laughter. "Mom," Michael's voice called down, "Tommy says there's a treehouse in the backyard. Can we go look?" "Our treehouse," Tommy added excitedly. "We can make it our secret twin headquarters." The three adults exchanged glances, sharing a moment of understanding. These moments of pure childhood joy were worth all the complicated emotions and logistics they were navigating. "Dinner first," Sarah called back, "then treehouse." As if on cue, both boys thundered down the stairs, their feet hitting each step in perfect synchronization. They burst into the room, identical, faces flushed with excitement. "Can Mrs. Parker stay for dinner?" Tommy asked, while Michael simultaneously said, "Can Mum stay?" Eleanor hesitated, but Sarah stepped forward. "Of course she can. In fact, why don't you call Mr. Parker and ask him to join us too? We can all have dinner together." The boys cheered and raced to the phone, arguing good-naturedly about who would get to dial. Marcus watched them, then turned to the two women. "We might as well start getting used to family dinners," he said. "Something tells me this is just the beginning." As they prepared for dinner, Sarah found herself studying the boys, noting how they moved around each other with an innate awareness of the other's presence. When Tommy reached for the phone, Michael was already holding it out to him. When Michael stumbled slightly, Tommy's hand shot out to steady him without either boy seeming to think about it. The doorbell rang again, James arriving for dinner, and the boys ran to answer it together, their excited voices blending into one as they told him about their plans for the treehouse. "We're thinking of putting up fairy lights," Tommy explained, "and making a pulley system for snacks," Michael added, "and having a secret password," they finished in unison, then dissolved into giggles. Sarah watched as James entered, carrying a homemade apple pie, Eleanor's specialty. The gesture wasn't lost on her. They were all trying in their own ways to build something new from the fragments of their separate lives. Marcus appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about family," she said softly, "about how it can be bigger and more complicated than we ever imagined, but also more beautiful." He squeezed her gently, and they watched as their expanded family moved toward the dining room, the boys leading the way, already planning their next adventure together. The first real challenge to their carefully constructed new normal came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Tommy sat at the kitchen counter in the Bennett home, pushing his after-school snack around his plate, unusually quiet. Sarah noticed his subdued behavior immediately. Mother's intuition, perhaps, or simply years of reading her son's moods. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "Did something happen at school?" Tommy looked up, his hazel eyes troubled. "Mom, why does Michael live with the Parkers instead of with us? We're his real family, aren't we?" The question Sarah had been dreading finally arrived. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words to explain a situation that she herself still struggled to justify. "The Parkers are his real family, too, honey. Family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who loves you and takes care of you. Michael has two families who love him very much. But why couldn't we all be together from the beginning?" Tommy persisted. "Did you and Dad not want both of us?" Sarah felt her heart breaking. "Of course we wanted both of you. We wanted you, more than anything in the world. But sometimes grown-ups make complicated decisions that they think are right at the time. Was it because we were too much trouble?" Tommy's voice was small, vulnerable. "No, absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, pulling him into a hug. "It was because Michael needed special medical care when he was a baby, and the Parkers could help him in a way that we couldn't at the time. They saved his life, Tommy. They're heroes. Across town, in the Parker household, Michael was having a similar conversation with Eleanor. He sat on their worn but comfortable couch, his homework forgotten on the coffee table. "But if they're my birth parents, why didn't they keep me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Didn't they love me enough?" Eleanor sat beside him, her heart aching. "Oh, sweetheart, they loved you so much. Sometimes love means making really hard choices. Your birth mother wanted to make sure you had the best chance at life, even if that meant letting someone else take care of you." "But Tommy got to stay with them," Michael said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice for the first time since discovering his twin. "Michael, look at me," Eleanor said gently. "Do you remember when you were sick last winter, and Dad and I took turns staying up all night with you?" Michael nodded. "That's what parents do. They do whatever it takes to protect their children. When you were a baby, you needed special care that your birth parents couldn't provide at that time. Your birth mother made the bravest choice a mother can make. She put your needs before her own feelings." Later that evening, both sets of parents met in the Bennetts' living room after the boys had gone to bed. They had agreed early on to be completely open with each other about any issues that arose, understanding that they needed to present a united front for the twins' sake. "Tommy's starting to ask questions," Sarah said, her voice tight with emotion. "Difficult questions." "Michael too," Eleanor added. "I think the initial excitement is wearing off, and now they're trying to make sense of everything." Marcus paced the room, his business instincts pushing him to find solutions. "Maybe we should consider family therapy. Someone who specializes in adoption and separated siblings? That might be good for all of us," James said quietly. He had been the most reserved throughout this process, but his love for Michael was evident in every careful word he chose. "We're all navigating uncharted territory here." Sarah looked around the room at these people who had become, unexpectedly, an essential part of her life. "I keep thinking about what Tommy said today, about real family. How do we help them understand that they haven't lost or gained family, but that their family has grown?" "Maybe that's exactly what we tell them," Eleanor suggested. "That families come in all shapes and sizes, and they're lucky enough to have two families who love them. And maybe," Marcus added, "we need to show them that we're all one family now in our own unique way, not trying to replace or compete with each other, but working together for their benefit." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all fall silent. Tommy appeared in the doorway looking small in his superhero pajamas. "I had a bad dream," he said softly. Sarah started to rise, but Tommy shook his head. Can Mrs. Parker come? Like when Michael has bad dreams?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she stood and walked over to Tommy. "Of course I can, sweetheart. Would you like to hear the special story I tell Michael when he has bad dreams?" Tommy nodded, taking her hand. As Eleanor led him back upstairs, the remaining adults exchanged glances. Perhaps the boys understood more than they realized, that love isn't divided when shared, but multiplied. "We're going to need a bigger calendar," James said finally, breaking the emotional tension in the room. "And maybe a family group chat." Sarah laughed softly, wiping away tears. "And definitely that therapist's number," she added, reaching for her phone to make a note. Above them, they could hear Eleanor's gentle voice telling a story about two special stars that shone brighter when they were together, but never lost their shine when apart. It was a story she had created for Michael years ago, never knowing how prophetic it would turn out to be. Dr. Rachel Chen's family therapy office became a sanctuary of sorts for both families over the next few weeks. The walls were painted in soothing blues and greens, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle to encourage open communication. The twins particularly loved the sand table in the corner, where they would often sit together during sessions, creating elaborate stories, with the miniature figures while the adults talked. "What I'm seeing," Dr. Chen said during one session, "is that the boys are actually handling this transition remarkably well. They're showing a natural ability to adapt. That's quite impressive. The challenge now is helping them maintain their individual identities while embracing their connection as twins." Tommy and Michael sat at the sand table, building what they called their perfect world, a sprawling landscape that somehow incorporated both the Bennett's pool and the Parkers, vegetable garden with two identical houses connected by a bridge. The bridge is important, Michael explained to no one in particular, carefully placing it between the houses. That way we can visit whenever we want. And look, Tommy added, positioning tiny figures around both houses. Everyone's together. Dr. Chen smiled at their creation. They're showing us exactly what they need, she said to the parents, for they want connection without having to choose between their families. Sarah watched the boys play, noting how they moved in sync even when focused on different tasks. But how do we make that work in reality? We can't actually build a bridge between our houses. Maybe not physically, Dr. Chen replied, but we can build emotional bridges. The boys are already doing it naturally. Perhaps it's time for the adults to follow their lead. That evening, as the families gathered for their now regular Thursday dinner, Eleanor arrived with an old photo album tucked under her arm. I found this while cleaning yesterday, she said, placing it on the coffee table. I thought maybe we could all look at it together. The album was filled with photos of Michael growing up, his first steps, first day of school, birthday, parties, and everyday moments that Eleanor had carefully documented. Sarah sat close to Eleanor on the couch, both women tearful as they turned the pages. Look at this one, Eleanor said softly, pointing to a picture of Michael at age 3, covered in finger paint. He was so proud of that masterpiece. Tommy did the exact same thing, Sarah exclaimed, pulling out her phone to show a nearly identical photo. Even the same colors. The boys crowded around, fascinated by these glimpses of their parallel childhoods. Mom, Tommy said suddenly, looking at Sarah, could we make a new album, with all of us together? That's a wonderful idea, Marcus said, watching as Michael nodded enthusiastically. We could start with pictures from the day you two met. James, who had been quiet throughout the evening, cleared his throat. I have an idea too, he said. The community center where Eleanor volunteers is having their annual carnival next weekend. Maybe we could all go together, make it our first official family outing? The twins' eyes lit up at the word carnival, but it was the word family that made everyone in the room smile. They were starting to feel like one unit, albeit an unconventional one. We could make it a tradition, Sarah suggested. Monthly family outings, alternating between activities each family chooses. And weekly dinners, Eleanor added. These Thursday gatherings, they've become the highlight of our week. Marcus watched as the twins whispered together, clearly plotting something. What are you two conspiring about over there? We want to do our baseball games together, Tommy announced. Yeah, Michael added. We want to be on the same team. The adults exchanged glances. They had been keeping the boys on separate teams, worried about confusion and competition, but maybe it was time to trust their instincts more. I'll talk. To the coaches, Marcus said. See if we can arrange a transfer for next season. As the evening wound down, the twins convinced everyone to play a board game, their new favorite activity, because it allowed all of them to participate together. They sat around the dining room table, rolling dice and moving pieces, their laughter filling the room. Sarah looked around at their expanded family, Eleanor helping Tommy count spaces, James teaching Michael his strategy for landing on the best properties, Marcus keeping score with exaggerated announcements that made everyone laugh. This wasn't the family she had imagined all those years ago in the hospital, faced with an impossible choice. It was better, messier, more complicated, but infinitely richer. Your turn, Mum, Tommy called out, and both boys looked up expectantly. Sarah paused, realizing they had both called her Mom, not in confusion, but in the simple way children expand their hearts to include more love. Eleanor caught her eye across the table and smiled, understanding perfectly. The dice, please, Sarah said, holding out her hand. As she rolled, she silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought them all together, not as two separate families, but as one unique and beautiful whole. The community carnival turned out to be exactly what their newly formed family needed. The fairgrounds were alive with color and movement, carousel lights twinkling in the early evening, the smell of cotton candy and popcorn wafting through the air, and the sound of laughter and music creating a perfect backdrop for their first official family outing. The twins ran ahead, their matching blue t-shirts making them easy to spot in the crowd. They had insisted on dressing alike for the occasion, a habit that both sets of parents had decided to allow for special events. "Look," Tommy shouted, pointing to a ring toss game. "We could win those giant pandas." "Two of them," Michael added excitedly. "One for each house." Eleanor smiled at their thoughtfulness. They were always finding ways to maintain balance between their two homes. She reached for her purse, but Marcus was already stepping forward. "How about we all try?" he suggested, paying for enough. "Rings for everyone. Family competition. Kids versus parents." The twins' eyes lit up at the challenge. What followed was an hour of increasingly competitive ring tosses, with James surprising everyone by having the best aim. In the end, they won not only the two pandas, but also a collection of smaller prizes that the boys immediately began dividing equally between their two homes. "The red car goes to Tommy's room," Michael declared, "and the blue one goes to mine. That way when we visit we each have one to play with." Sarah watched them sort their prizes, her heart full. They had developed their own system of balance, ensuring neither home felt more important than the other. It was a wisdom beyond their years, born from their unique situation. As the evening progressed, they tried every ride and game the carnival had to offer. The adults took turns accompanying the boys, creating different combinations of parent-child moments that felt natural and right. Tommy didn't hesitate to grab Eleanor's hand when the haunted house proved scarier than expected, and Michael sought out Sarah's comfort after a dizzying ride on the tilt-a-whirl. At the face-painting station, the twins got identical tiger designs, then convinced all four parents to get small matching stars on their hands. "Now we're all connected," Tommy explained seriously, "even when we're apart." The family settled at a picnic table for dinner, sharing corn dogs and funnel cakes. James pulled out his camera. He had become the unofficial family photographer, capturing these precious moments of their evolving relationship. "Dad," Michael said suddenly, looking at James, "can you teach Tommy how to make your special pancakes, the ones with the secret ingredient?" James glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course I can. Maybe next weekend when you boys have your sleepover. And Mom," Tommy turned to Sarah, "could you show Michael your trick for hitting home runs? He has a big game coming up." "I'd love to," Sarah replied, reaching across the table to squeeze Michael's hand. Eleanor watched these exchanges with tears in her eyes. The boys were creating their own web of family connections, weaving together the skills and love from both sets of parents into something uniquely theirs. As the sun began to set, they made their way to the Ferris wheel for one final ride. The operator looked confused when all six of them approached together, but the twins quickly explained. "We're all family," they said in unison, with the simple confidence of children who knew exactly who they were and who they belonged to. They ended up taking two cars, the twins with Marcus and James in one, Sarah and Eleanor in the other. As they rose above the carnival, Sarah looked over at the other car, hearing the boys' excited chatter and the men's deeper laughter. "Listen to them," Eleanor said softly. "Who would have thought we'd end up here?" Sarah turned to the woman, who had raised her son for 8 years, who had loved him as fiercely as she had loved Tommy. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying the weight of years of gratitude, "for everything you've done, for everything you're still doing." "We're all doing it together now," Eleanor replied, reaching for Sarah's hand. "That's what family does." Below them, the carnival lights began to twinkle in the growing darkness, and from the other car came the sound of both boys counting the lights in perfect synchronization. Their voices floated through the evening air, a symbol of the harmony their unusual family had found. As they descended, plans were already being made for their next family outing. The boys wanted to go camping, which would present a whole new set of logistical challenges, but no one seemed daunted by the prospect. They had learned that the joy of being together far outweighed any complications their situation might present. "Ice cream before we head home," Marcus suggested as they stepped off the Ferris wheel. "2 scoops?" the twins asked hopefully. "1 scoop," all 4 parents responded automatically, then laughed at their synchronized parenting. Walking toward the ice cream stand, their expanded family moved as one unit. The twins in the middle, all 4 parents surrounding them like protective satellites. They had created something rare and beautiful, a family bound not by conventional ties, but by choice, understanding, and love. The first parent-teacher conference after the twins' reunion proved to be more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Both schools had scheduled their conferences for the same evening, and both boys insisted they wanted all 4 parents present for their respective meetings. "We could split up," Marcus suggested during their weekly family dinner planning session. 2 parents at each school. "But which 2? Sarah asked, voicing the delicate question they'd all been avoiding. The twins, who had been doing homework at the kitchen counter, looked up with concern. They had become increasingly sensitive to any situation that forced their parents to make choices or draw lines between the families. "I have an idea," Tommy said, exchanging a quick glance with Michael. "Could we switch schools so we can be together?" The request hung in the air, heavy with implications. The adults had been expecting this question eventually, but not so soon. Dr. Chen had warned them that the boys might start pushing for more integration in their lives. "That's a big decision," Eleanor said gently. "Your schools are part of your routines, your friendships, but we could make new friends together," Michael argued. "And Joey from my class already said he'd love to meet Tommy." Marcus watched the boys' eager faces, remembering Dr. Chen's advice about not immediately dismissing their suggestions, no matter how complicated they might seem. "How about we handle the conferences first, and then we can all sit down and seriously discuss the school situation?" The boys nodded, satisfied that their request was being taken seriously. James, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "What if we asked both schools to reschedule one of the conferences, explain our unique situation?" And so on a Tuesday evening, all 4 parents sat in Mrs. Harrison's classroom at Westbrook Elementary, listening to Tommy's teacher describe his recent progress. The next evening, they gathered in Mr. Rodriguez's classroom at East Side Elementary for Michael's conference. What struck them most was how similar the reports were. Both boys were excelling in science and physical education, both showed a natural talent for leadership, and both had recently developed a habit of telling stories about their twin during class. Michael has been sharing what he calls twin facts. "During show and tell," Mr. Rodriguez said, smiling. "Did you know that when one twin gets hurt, the other can feel it? Tommy's been saying the exact same thing," Mrs. Harrison had told them the previous evening. "He's convinced they have a special connection." After the conferences, the families gathered at a local diner, their new favorite spot for impromptu family meetings. Over plates of French fries and milkshakes, they began the difficult conversation about the boys' request to attend the same school. "Academically, they're both doing well where they are," Sarah began carefully. "And there's something to be said for maintaining some separation in their lives. But they're going to be together eventually," James pointed out. "If not now, then in high school. Maybe it would be easier to transition while they're younger." The twins sat in their own booth nearby, heads bent together over a shared comic book, occasionally glancing anxiously at their parents' table. Eleanor watched them for a moment before speaking. "When we first started this journey, we agreed to let the boys guide us somewhat. They've shown remarkable maturity in handling everything so far." Marcus nodded slowly. "And Westbrook has that advanced science program Michael's been interested in." "East Side has the better baseball team," Tommy called out, proving they had been eavesdropping all along. "And the best art teacher ever," Michael added. The parents couldn't help but laugh at their not-so-subtle lobbying. "You two get back to your comic," Sarah called over, but her voice was fond. As they continued their discussion, a plan began to take shape. They would wait until the next school year, giving everyone time to prepare for the transition. They would look at both schools carefully, considering all factors: academic programs, extracurricular activities, distance from both homes, and most importantly, which environment would best support both boys together while still encouraging their individual growth. "We should probably start looking at houses too," James said quietly, causing everyone to look at him in surprise. "Not immediately, but Eleanor and I have been thinking. Maybe we could find something closer to wherever the boys end up in school. Make the back and forth easier on everyone." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Eleanor's hand, understanding the magnitude of what they were offering. The Parkers had lived in their home for 30 years, but they were willing to move to make this new family dynamic work better. We could help with that, Marcus offered. My real estate division might know of something suitable. Look, Michael's excited voice interrupted their planning. The boys had abandoned their comic and were standing at the diner's window pointing at something outside. The adults joined them to see what had caught their attention. Through the window, they could see a small park across the street where a group of children were playing baseball under the streetlights. What made the scene magical was the way the setting sun had created perfect twin shadows of each player on the ground. That's like us, Tommy said softly. Two parts of the same person. But better together, Michael added. The parents exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom in their son's simple observation. They were all shadows of each other in some way. Two mothers, two fathers, two homes, two schools. But instead of creating division, these doubles had somehow multiplied their capacity for love and understanding. Who wants dessert? Marcus asked, trying to lighten the moment that had become unexpectedly profound. 2 scoops? The twins asked hopefully, their synchronized request making everyone laugh. 1 scoop, all 4 parents responded automatically, then laughed again, at their own unity. As they settled back into their booths, the adults couldn't help but feel they were on the right track. Every decision, every compromise, every moment of adjustment was leading them towards something extraordinary, a family that defied convention but embraced connection in all its forms. The decision about which school the twins would attend together became surprisingly simple one Saturday morning during their weekly baseball practice. As both boys took turns at bat, their natural synchronization drawing attention from other parents, their coach approached Marcus and James with an interesting proposition. "Have you considered Brighton Academy?" Coach Anderson asked, watching as Michael hit a perfect line drive. "They've got an exceptional baseball program, and their science department just received a major grant for new facilities." Brighton Academy was a well-respected private school located almost exactly halfway between the Bennett and Parker homes. It hadn't occurred to any of them as an option, primarily because of its exclusive reputation and hefty tuition. "It's quite selective," Marcus said, watching Tommy duplicate his brother's hit with identical form, "and expensive." "They offer scholarships for exceptional students," Coach Anderson replied, "and I'd be happy to recommend both boys. They've got something special. Not just their baseball skills, but the way they work together. It's unique." That evening, during an emergency family meeting called around the Parkers' dinner table, the adults discussed this unexpected possibility while the twins worked on their latest project, a detailed map of their perfect neighborhood, where both families would live on the same street. "Brighton Academy does have an amazing reputation," Sarah said, scrolling through the school's website on her tablet. "And look at these facilities. But can we ask the boys to start fresh at a new school?" Eleanor worried. Neither of them would know anyone there. "They'd know each other," James pointed out, "and maybe that's not a bad thing. They could build their shared experience from the ground up." Marcus, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I've been thinking about something, Dr. Chen said, about how the boys need space to develop both their twin relationship and their individual identities. A new school might actually help with that. They wouldn't be Tommy from Westbrook and Michael from East Side trying to merge their lives. They'd just be the Bennett Parker twins, free to be themselves." The sound of excited whispering drew their attention to the living room, where the boys had abandoned their map-making to eavesdrop. "We want to go," they called out, in unison when they realized they'd been spotted. "You don't even know what we're talking about," Sarah laughed. "We heard new school and together," Tommy said. "That's all we need to know," Michael finished. The adults couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. "Come here, you two," Eleanor called. "If we're going to discuss this, we should all do it together." The twins bounded over to the table, squeezing into chairs between their parents. They listened intently as the adults explained about Brighton Academy, its challenging academic programs, its state-of-the-art facilities, and, yes, its excellent baseball team. "But it would mean leaving your current schools," James emphasized, "saying goodbye to your friends." "We could still see them after school and on weekends," Michael said thoughtfully. "And we'd have each other," Tommy added. "Plus, we could make new friends together." Sarah pulled up pictures of the school on her tablet, and the boys leaned in eagerly to see. Their eyes widened at the science labs, the baseball field, and especially the school's mascot, twin eagles in flight. "Look!" Michael pointed excitedly. "Even their mascot is twins." "It's like it was meant to be," Tommy declared with the absolute conviction only an 8-year-old could muster. The parents exchanged glances, recognizing the signs of destiny they'd come to appreciate over the past months. First the carnival, then the house that had just come on the market 3 blocks from Brighton Academy, which James and Eleanor had secretly toured the day before. And now this. "We'd need to apply," Marcus cautioned, "and interview, and there's no guarantee you'd both be accepted." "We will be," the twins said with such certainty that the adults had to believe them. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, during their weekly sleepover at the Bennetts, the parents sat in the garden, enjoying the peaceful evening and the sense of possibility in the air. "You know what amazes me most?" Sarah said softly. "How every challenge we've faced has somehow led us to something better than we could have planned." Eleanor nodded, understanding completely. "It's like the boys have been leading us all along. We just had to be brave enough to follow." "Brighton Academy," James mused, looking up at the stars. "Who would have thought? Well, if you'd told me 6 months ago that we'd all be sitting here together, planning our son's future." Marcus let the sentence trail off, smiling at the extraordinary turn their lives had taken. A small noise from the house made them all turn. The twins stood in the doorway in their matching pajamas, looking slightly sheepish at being caught out of bed. "We couldn't sleep," Tommy explained. "Too excited," Michael added. "About Brighton?" Sarah asked, making room for them on the outdoor sofa. "About everything," they said together, snuggling between their parents. As they sat there under the stars, this unconventional family of 8, the future seemed to spread out before them like a path lined with possibilities. Brighton Academy was just the next step in their journey, a journey that had begun with a chance encounter in a school courtyard and had led them all to a place none of them could have imagined. But that felt absolutely right. The Brighton Academy admissions office had never seen anything quite like the Bennett Parker twins. During their entrance interview, Tommy and Michael sat side by side in chairs slightly too big for them, their feet swinging in perfect synchronization as they answered questions with a charming mix of individual personality and twin harmony. "And why do you want to attend Brighton Academy?" Mrs. Blackwood, the admissions director, asked, trying to maintain her professional demeanor, despite being captivated by the boys' unique dynamic. "We want to learn together," Tommy began, "and grow together," Michael continued. "But also be our own people," they finished in unison, then giggled at their synchronized response. Mrs. Blackwood glanced at her colleague, Dr. Peters, the school psychologist, who had been observing the interaction with fascination. They had never interviewed twins before, let alone ones with such an unusual family situation. "Your application mentions that you've only recently discovered your twins," Dr. Peters said gently. "How has that been for you both?" The boys exchanged one of their quick, communicative looks that their parents had come to recognize as their private way of deciding who would speak first. "It was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing," Michael said thoughtfully. "Like when you're doing a puzzle and you finally find the exact piece you need." "But better," Tommy added, "because Michael isn't just a piece of me. He's his own whole person too. We're the same but different." In the waiting room, all 4 parents sat nervously, trying to distract themselves with magazines, but really straining to hear any snippet of conversation from behind the closed door. "They'll be fine," Eleanor said, more to reassure herself than anyone else. "They're remarkable boys." Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. Over the past months, these small gestures of support between the 2 mothers had become natural, a physical representation of their growing bond. Inside the office, Mrs. Blackwood was reviewing the boys' academic records. "Your grades are excellent at both your current schools," she noted, "but what interests me is how similar your strengths and challenges are. You both excel in science and physical education, but struggle a bit with creative writing." "That's because we think too much alike sometimes," Tommy explained. "Our teachers say we need to use more imagination," Michael added, "but we think we could help each other get better at it," they concluded together. Dr. Peters leaned forward, intrigued. "How would you do that?" Well, Michael started, Tommy's really good at coming up with the beginning of stories. And Michael always knows the perfect ending, Tommy continued. So together we could write amazing stories, they finished enthusiastically. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, during which the twins demonstrated not only their academic potential, but also their remarkable ability to balance their twin connection with their individual personalities. They talked about their separate experiences at their current schools, their shared love of baseball, and their dreams for the future. I want to be a scientist, Tommy declared. And I want to be a doctor, Michael added. So we can work together. To help people, they explained, their excitement palpable. When they finally emerged from the office, all four parents stood up anxiously. The twins bounded over, their faces glowing with confidence. Mrs. Blackwood wants to talk to you now, they announced. The adults entered the office, leaving the boys in the care of the school secretary, who had already fallen under their charm and was showing them pictures of her own twins, now in college. Please sit down, Mrs. Blackwood gestured to the chairs. I must say your sons are quite extraordinary. Thank you, all four parents responded automatically, then shared a smile at their synchronization. They were beginning to rival the twins in that department. We've never had a situation quite like yours before, Mrs. Blackwood continued. Two sets of parents, two different households. It's unusual, but what impresses me most is how you've all worked together to create stability and support for both boys. Dr. Peters nodded in agreement. The twins show a remarkable level of emotional adjustment to their situation. They've clearly been well supported through this transition. We've had help, Sarah said modestly, thinking of Dr. Chen and their weekly family therapy sessions. And we're still learning, James added. Every day brings new challenges, but also new joys. Mrs. Blackwood smiled warmly. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that we would be honored to have Tommy and Michael join our Brighton Academy family this fall. Their academic records are excellent. Their interview was impressive, and frankly, we believe they would bring something unique and valuable to our school community. The parents exchanged relieved and happy glances. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand, while James wrapped an arm around Eleanor's shoulders. However, Mrs. Blackwood continued, we do have one condition. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. We would like to document their first year at Brighton as a case study in twin education. With your permission, of course. Dr. Peters believes their situation could provide valuable insights for other families of separated twins. The parents looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations they'd developed over months of co-parenting. We'd need to discuss it with the boys, Eleanor said finally, and establish clear boundaries, Marcus added. To protect their privacy, Sarah continued. While still helping others, James concluded. Mrs. Blackwood and Dr. Peters exchanged impressed looks at this demonstration of cooperative parenting. Of course, Dr. Peters agreed. We would follow your lead entirely. The boys' well-being would be our primary concern. As they left the office that afternoon, the twins racing ahead down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm, the parents felt a sense of rightness about their decision. Brighton Academy, with its twin eagle mascots and commitment to both academic excellence and emotional development, seemed like the perfect next step in their journey. Ice cream to celebrate, the twins called back over their shoulders. 2 scoops? All 4 parents asked in unison, beating the boys to their usual request. The sound of laughter, children's and adults blending together, filled the hallway, a symphony of joy that echoed through the prestigious halls of Brighton Academy, heralding the beginning of their next great adventure. The weeks following the Brighton Academy acceptance flew by in a whirlwind of preparation and change. The Parkers had found a lovely house just 3 blocks from the school, close enough to hear the bell ring on quiet mornings. The moving boxes were still being unpacked when both families gathered for a special celebration, the twins' 9th birthday. They had decided to host it in the Parkers' new backyard, which was perfect for the occasion with its sprawling lawn and ancient oak, tree that seemed to have been waiting decades for a tire swing. The morning of the party found all 6 family members working together to transform the space into a baseball-themed wonderland. The banner goes higher on the left, Tommy directed from his perch on Marcus's shoulders. No, the right, Michael countered from his similar position on James's shoulders. Maybe in the middle? They compromised simultaneously. Sarah and Eleanor exchanged amused glances as they arranged cupcakes on a table decorated with baseball mitts and vintage cards. They had ordered 2 identical cakes, one for each house, but would serve them together, a symbol of their united celebration. "Remember their last birthday?" Eleanor asked softly, "when we were still separate families?" Sarah nodded, her hands stilling on the cupcake she was arranging. "I spent the whole day wondering if Michael was having a good celebration, if he was happy. And I kept thinking about Tommy, wondering what traditions your family had." Eleanor wiped a tear from her cheek. "Now look at us." The backyard was filling with guests, friends from both schools, baseball teammates, neighbors old and new. The twins raced around, introducing their friends to each other with excited descriptions of who was who and how they knew them. Here's Joey from my old school, he's the best at math. And this is Sam from my class, he can do a backflip. The boys had insisted on inviting their teachers from both schools as well, wanting to share their appreciation before moving on to Brighton. Mrs. Harrison from Westbrook and Mr. Rodriguez from East Side stood chatting with Mrs. Blackwood, who had accepted the invitation to join the celebration. "It's remarkable," Mrs. Blackwood commented, watching the twins organize their friends into teams for a baseball game. "They have such a natural ability to bring people together." Indeed, the game that followed was a perfect example of their bridge-building skills. The twins made sure the teams were mixed with friends from both schools, and they positioned themselves on opposite sides to keep things fair. Their natural leadership abilities shone as they encouraged their teammates and celebrated every good play, regardless of which team made it. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus called everyone together for the cake ceremony. The twins stood side by side behind their identical cakes, their faces glowing in the light of 18 candles, 9 on each cake. "Make a wish," their friends called out. Tommy and Michael closed their eyes, their expressions matching in concentration. Then, in perfect sync, they blew out their candles, opening their eyes to grin at each other. "Did you wish for the same thing?" someone called out. "We can't tell," they responded in unison, laughing at their synchronized response. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, the twins gathered their presents into 2 piles, one for each house, already planning how to share their new treasures between their homes. "Look what Joey's mom gave us," Michael said, holding up 2 identical baseball caps with their names embroidered on the back. "And Mrs. Blackwood brought us Brighton Academy shirts," Tommy added, displaying the matching uniforms they would soon be wearing. The adults sat on the new patio furniture, watching the boys sort through their gifts with methodical care, ensuring everything was divided fairly between their 2 homes. "They've gotten so good at this," James observed, "balancing everything." "Better than we have sometimes," Marcus agreed, thinking of the occasional complicated logistics of their shared custody arrangement. "But we're learning from them," Sarah said, smiling as she watched the twins demonstrate their new remote control cars to their remaining friends, showing how they could race them in parallel. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, the last guests departed with happy waves and calls of happy birthday. The twins, tired but content, sprawled on the grass, their heads close together as they watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Best birthday ever," Tommy declared. "Definitely," Michael agreed. "Because we're together," they said in unison. The 4 parents sat together on the patio, sharing a quiet moment as they watched their sons. The birthday celebration had been more than just a party. It was a testament to how far they'd come, how much they'd grown as a family. "You know what I realized today?" Eleanor said softly. "This is the first birthday I've celebrated with both boys. But somehow it feels like we've been doing this forever." "That's because we were always meant to be together," Sarah replied, reaching for her hand. "It just took us a while to figure it out." "Hey, Dad!" the twins called out, and all 4 parents answered, "Yes?" automatically, making everyone laugh. "Can we sleep in the treehouse tonight?" the boys asked, referring to the half-finished structure James and Marcus had been building together on weekends. "It's not ready yet," James called back. "Still needs a roof," Marcus added. And safety rails, Sarah continued. Maybe next birthday, Eleanor concluded. The twins sat up, grinning at their parents' synchronized response. See? They said to each other. They're getting better at the twin thing too. As the evening wrapped up, no one rushed to leave. This was their new normal. Fluid boundaries between houses, between families, between hearts. The birthday celebration had been just another step in their journey, another thread in the tapestry of their unique family story. The first day of school at Brighton Academy dawned bright and clear. The twins stood in front of the impressive building, wearing their new uniforms, identical backpacks slung over their shoulders. Behind them, all four parents gathered, each feeling the weight of this moment differently. "Ready?" Tommy asked, his brother reaching for his hand. "Ready," Michael replied, squeezing back. Mrs. Blackwood greeted them at the entrance, her warm smile putting everyone at ease. "Welcome to Brighton Academy, Bennett Parkers," she said, using the hyphenated name that had become their unofficial family trademark. The boys had been assigned to the same classroom, something that had been carefully discussed among all the adults involved, including Dr. Chen. For this first year, she had advised, let them draw strength from each other while they adjust to their new environment. As they walked through the halls, the twins attracted curious glances from other students, but unlike the stares they sometimes got in public, these looks were filled with interest rather than confusion. Brighton Academy had prepared its community for the arrival of the Bennett Parker twins, presenting their unique family situation as something special rather than strange. Their new teacher, Ms. Andrews, had arranged their desks side by side, but slightly angled toward each other, close enough for support, but positioned to encourage interaction with other students as well. It was these small, thoughtful details that confirmed they had made the right choice. "Look," Michael whispered, pointing to the classroom walls. Among the educational posters and student artwork, there was a section dedicated to famous twins throughout history. Scientists, athletes, artists who had achieved great things both together and individually. "That could be us someday," Tommy whispered back, his eyes shining with possibility. The parents lingered at the doorway, each feeling the emotional tug of this new beginning. Sarah and Eleanor held hands, drawing strength from each other as they had learned to do over the past months. Marcus and James stood shoulder to shoulder, their proud father poses nearly identical. "They'll be fine," Marcus said, as much to convince himself as the others. "More than fine," James agreed, watching the boys settle into their desks with confident smiles. "They're ready for this," Sarah added, squeezing Eleanor's hand. "And so are we," Eleanor concluded. As they turned to leave, Miss Andrews called, "Out softly, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, Mr. and Mrs. Parker. Could you wait a moment?" The parents paused, turning back. Miss Andrews approached them with a warm smile, holding what looked like a project proposal. "I know we discussed waiting to start the twin study," she began, "but the boys came to me this morning with an idea they'd like to share." She handed them a carefully written document, decorated with drawings of the twin eagle mascots. The title read, "The Twin Journey, a story by Tommy and Michael Bennett Parker." "They want to write about their experience," Ms. Andrews explained. "Not just for the school study, but for other children who might be going through something similar. They said, and I quote, 'Everyone should know that having two families just means having twice as much love.'" The parents read through the proposal, their eyes filling with tears at their son's words. The boys had outlined chapters about discovering each other, learning to be brothers, and most touchingly, about how their parents had learned to be one big family. "My favorite part," Ms. Andrews said softly, "is their dedication. Look at the bottom." There, in careful handwriting that switched between Tommy's slightly neater script and Michael's more flowing style, was written, "To our four parents who taught us that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. To our two homes which are really just different rooms in the same heart, and to other kids like us who might be searching for their missing piece. Sometimes the best families are the ones that surprise you." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the wisdom in their children's words. Eleanor leaned against James, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Marcus stood straight and tall, but his eyes shone with pride and emotion. They wrote this themselves, he asked, his voice slightly hoarse. Ms. Andrews nodded. Every word. They came in early specifically to show me. They said they'd been working on it all summer, taking turns writing at both houses. Through the classroom window, they could see the twins already making friends with their classmates, their natural charm and synchronized storytelling drawing a small crowd of curious students. I think, Ms. Andrews said thoughtfully, that your boys are going to teach us all something important about family, love and acceptance. Brighton Academy is lucky to have them, and you. As the parents finally turned to leave, they caught one last glimpse of their sons. Tommy was explaining something with enthusiastic hand gestures, while Michael added perfect comedic timing to the story. Their new classmates were captivated, drawn in by the unique energy that seemed to flow between the twins. Walking out of Brighton Academy that morning, the four parents felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter in a school courtyard had led them here, not to an ending but to a new beginning. Their unconventional family had found its rhythm, its balance, its own unique way of being whole. 1 year later, the Bennett Parker family gathered in Brighton Academy's auditorium for a very special presentation. The twins stood confidently at the podium, their matching Brighton uniforms neat and pressed, their faces glowing with excitement, as they prepared to share their story. The audience was filled with their extended family, friends from both their old schools, their baseball teammates, and most importantly, other families of separated twins who had reached out after hearing about their journey. Dr. Chen sat in the front row, beaming with pride at how far they had all come. Welcome, everyone, Tommy began, his voice clear and strong. To our family story, Michael continued seamlessly. Which is also your story, they finished together, looking directly at the other twin pairs in the audience. Their presentation, which they had worked on all year as part of Brighton's special study program, was a multimedia showcase of their journey. Pictures flashed on the screen behind them, their first meeting in the school courtyard, their debut baseball game as teammates, holiday celebrations that blended both families' traditions, quiet moments of homework at kitchen tables in both homes. People sometimes ask us if it's confusing having two houses, Michael said, or if it's hard having four parents, Tommy added. But we think we're the lucky ones, they declared together. They went on to explain how their family had grown and changed, how they had learned to navigate their unique situation, and most importantly, how love had been the foundation of everything. Our mum, Sarah, always says that some things are meant to be, Tommy shared. And our mum, Eleanor, says that family is what you make it, Michael continued. They're both right, they concluded together. In the audience, the four parents sat side by side, hands clasped together, watching their sons tell their story with poise and humor. The past year had brought its challenges, scheduling conflicts, occasional misunderstandings, moments of adjustment, but they had faced them together, growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. The twins moved to the heart of their presentation, sharing the lessons they had learned. Having two homes doesn't mean being divided, Tommy explained. It means having two safe places to land, Michael added. Having four parents doesn't mean being confused about who to love, Tommy continued. It means having more hearts to hold you, Michael finished. They shared stories about their first year at Brighton, how being together had made them both stronger, how they had learned to be twins while still being themselves, how their unique situation had helped other students understand that families come in all shapes and sizes. And now, they announced together, we have a surprise. They gestured to the side of the stage where James and Marcus wheeled out something large covered with a sheet. With a flourish, the twins pulled the sheet away to reveal a beautiful wooden sculpture, two trees growing from the same root system, their branches intertwining but each reaching toward the sky in its own way. We made this in art class, Tommy explained proudly. With help from both our dads, Michael added. Because this is what family looks like to us, they said together. The sculpture, they explained, would be permanently displayed in Brighton, Academy's main hall, along with their story, as a reminder that love knows no boundaries, and family is what you make it. As they concluded their presentation, the twins had one final surprise. They invited their parents to join them on stage, arranging them in a line, Sarah, Marcus, Eleanor, and James. This past year, Tommy began, his voice full of emotion. I've learned something important, Michael continued, equally moved. Family isn't about who you're born to, Tommy said. Or where you live, Michael added. It's about who loves you, they declared together. And who you love back, they finished, turning to embrace their parents. The applause was thunderous, but the family barely heard it. They were wrapped in a group hug, all 6 of them holding on to each other, their journey coming full circle. In this moment of pure joy and connection. Later that evening, as they celebrated with a family dinner in the Parkers' backyard, which had become their favorite gathering spot, the twins sat in their finished treehouse, watching their parents laugh and talk below. The sound of their happiness floated up through the evening air, mixing with the chirping of crickets and the distant church bells. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't come to school that day? Michael asked softly. Sometimes, Tommy replied, but I think we would have found each other anyway, because we're twins, because we're family. Below them, their parents had noticed their absence and called up to the treehouse. Boys, ice cream time! 2 scoops? They called back automatically. 2 scoops, all 4 parents confirmed, laughing at their familiar routine. As the twins climbed down to join their family, they exchanged a knowing look. They had learned that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places, that love has no limits, and that family is not about division, but multiplication, of joy, of support, of hearts connected by something stronger than circumstance. The Bennett Parker family had created something unique and beautiful, a testament to the power of love, understanding, and acceptance. Their story would continue to inspire others, showing that when it comes to family,